Thank you to the organizers, Elise and everyone, for inviting me to give a talk at this symposium. It is surely an honor to be here talking in honor of Ted DeWinter. Also, it's an honor to me being currently the Theo DeWinter Distinguished Faculty Fellow, which I think honors a lot of what Ted spoke for in this role as educators innovating both in the classroom and in the real world. And so trying to think about how to talk about this today, how to connect myself to Ted and connect Ted to all the engineers that came before him, and also connecting all of these ideas to kind of frontiers in manufacturing and the way we can think about moving forward in this direction. And I sort of struck on a word, an idea that I feel like connects all engineers, going back to the beginning of kind of the origin of engineering. And it's a word that'll probably strike fear in the hearts of any undergraduates in the audience right now. And it's this notion of failure. It is, how do we as educators kind of ride the successes and failures of our students in the classroom, our own failures as educators, to be able to convey the topics that we're trying to teach. But of course, as engineers, failure is everywhere in terms of how we think about teaching topics and how we think about teaching various engineering disciplines. And what I hope this talk is going to convey is ways to think about learning from failure and creating new things out of failure. And so for me, failure starts, I teach mechanics of materials, in which we introduce students for the first time to ideas of stretching, bending, twisting, inflating, buckling. And of course, all these things are ways that stuff can fail. You stretch something too much and then it breaks, and you bend something too much and then it breaks. And so much of the topics that we talk about in this course are understanding, when is something going to break? How do we predict when it's going to happen, and how do we prevent that from happening? And then students move on and they take the follow-on course to this, the structural mechanics course, in which the idea is to spend our time designing, modeling, analyzing structures. But of course, what those words mean are designing against failure, designing with the understanding that things could break too much or bend too much. And so one of the things I often do in these classes is make my students read this essay by Henry Petrovsky, which is forcing us to think about how engineers must actively learn from failure, how we have to approach a catastrophe or a disaster through the lens of almost like a forensic scientist. What went wrong? And I love this because it is telling us that we gather data from failures, because engineering is nothing except iterating towards a successful end. And it's this idea that we must fail over and over again and learn from those failures to be able to make new things. And sometimes these failures teach us something about structures and the way objects behave and the way stresses create problems. And a classic example is the Havilland Comet aircraft, which failed due to stress concentrating near the sharp corners of these square windows. And so engineers learn from this that we need to remove stress concentration from our structures, design them with circular windows, reducing the amount of stress and making them safer. This is a very straight ahead structural engineering kind of learning process here. But of course, failure always is multifaceted. And we can move to more modern disasters, the failure of the OceanGate submersible, a structure with new materials being subjected to extreme variations in pressure in ways that maybe those materials weren't expected to perform well. And this forced us to learn issues about fatigue, something that plagues engineers forever. How does a system work over and over again under repeated stresses without breaking? Underneath this, though, you start to see that there are societal engineering issues that emerge when you think about failure. And perhaps the biggest example of this is a failure that occurred directly across the river from us, in which a giant molasses tank failed and took out an entire neighborhood in the North End. Now, this, of course, was a structural failure. There was an inlet valve, and there was a bolt, and that bolt broke under the extreme loads of the tank filled with high amounts of molasses. But when you look into this failure, you learn that it's actually much more than a structural failure. It's a failure of corporate greed. It's a failure of a lack of the ability to have safety regulations. And as a result of this failure, the city of Boston made it a rule. If you're going to build a structure in our city, that structure's design has to be signed off by a professional engineer. that rule became and spread across the entire country. And the entire country now adopted this role of a professional engineer signing off on structures as a way for us to enable safe structural designs. Failures are often complex. We can think about things like the Challenger explosion, in which many of us maybe know that the origin of the failure of this was due to an O-ring that failed because it was operating under temperatures that it was unexpected to perform well in. But if you learn and you look more into this failure, you learn that even though this was a structural failure, this was a failure of engineering communication and the way that engineers can talk to each other about what went wrong. Here's an example of a slide that was given that should have made clear that this O-ring would fail at those temperatures. If this is not clear to you, it wasn't clear to anyone who saw this slide at that time either. And it taught us a lot about how engineers must talk about scientific results in a clear way to enable the proper lessons to be learned. Because failure is multifaceted and it's complex. It might involve something that was perfectly designed, like the door of this Boeing aircraft. But perhaps there could have been more safety and fail-safes and secondary measures that could be put into place so that if someone makes a mistake, these failures don't propagate down the line. Now, the type of failure that I've spent my career working on falls under the umbrella of what are known as instabilities. These are things that happen like if you step on a soda can and it buckles. And instabilities are a very tricky type of failure mode to study. And the reason is because this structure is perfectly happy right now. It's bearing this immense load from these weights that are sitting on top of it. It's fine, except a tiny perturbation causes that entire structure to collapse in an instant. And as I'm talking about learning from failure, what I'm thinking about is ways to turn failure into an opportunity. And I love this quote by Ed Catmull of Pixar, who says that the opposite of instability isn't stability, it's creativity. Perhaps we can learn from this to make new things. And so instabilities appear in all sorts of shapes and sizes. You can see instabilities in grains that can go from flowing smoothly to jamming as they arrange themselves in a way that clogs this outlet. And nature uses this in a functional way, for example, in the formation of birds' nests, in which you interleave and interlock these twigs from around each other so that they can't move and they can form a load-bearing structure. As you think about one-dimensional objects like rods, these are structures that'll buckle, they'll twist, they'll wrinkle, they'll snap between different configurations. And again, nature uses these, and humans use these in creative ways. We can use them to store tremendous amounts of energy in structures as we do feats of athleticism for pole vaulting. And nature can use these sort of tendril twisting instabilities for vines to climb up structures as they're growing to get to higher heights. And if you go from one-dimensional rods to two-dimensional plates and shells, you see a whole host of new instabilities. Again, buckling, wrinkling, and now crumpling, where you can store a tremendous amount of energy in a fold of a sheet. And again, nature has used these things. Your fingerprints on your hand are the direct formation of wrinkles during your growth in the embryo. And when it's believed that these wrinkles allow you to grasp things when your hands are wet, better than they would if your hands were smooth. And if you look at the design of automobiles, they now include a crumple zone, a zone that is designed to absorb all that elastic energy by being crushed and therefore protecting the components of the vehicle, us, back here. And so I'm going to give you two examples of ways that we've been working to create new things by taking advantage of instability. And the first instability we're talking about is that of jamming, in which these grains are perfectly happy and are perfectly flowing until a particular arrangement of these grains plugs this outlet. And this arrangement is kind of highlighted here. And you can see this form a nice little arch. And now our system has gone from flowing and fluid to jammed and solid. And if you keep plants at home, and are perhaps not as quick at changing them from one pot to the next, you've likely encountered a situation of your plant being root bound in the basis in the bucket that it's being held within. And this idea we've been working on in our lab as a way to form load-bearing structures from rubble, from things that have formed in a say a natural disaster, just rocks and string. And just by combining rocks and string in a layer by layer process, If you put the right amount of string in, you end up with a structure that can stand up under its own weight and is strong enough that you could stand on that and be able to bear that load. And this led to a process of trying to turn rubble into load-bearing structures. We started adding compressive stresses on them so that they could be a spanning beam for people to stand on, making plates where you could walk across, and making buckled arches to span gaps. And we started using higher strength materials like a Dyneema, a really high strength fiber, and strong rocks, and crushing these things into almost brick-like structures before we start using them. Now this looks fairly unimpressive to watch as a video, but I will note that the amount of force that that thing was under at the end of that video was the equivalent of one adult large elephant, about 40 kilonewtons. And we're taking systems like this and adding natural silk-based biological adhesives to them to make extremely large, scalable, load-bearing structures that we can do things like drive a Hummer over, as demonstrated in this video, which we're able to use to repair structures like damaged runways and damaged roadways, just using the rubble that got blown out of these cavities. And right now, this technology is down at an Air Force base in Florida, and we're testing how they're performing as we're driving C-130 cargo plane load carts over them to help in advanced runway design and runway repair in war-torn areas. The second instability I want to show you is one you've undoubtedly encountered if you've ever taken a tape measure and stretched it, pushed it out too far. Eventually, that tape measure is going to buckle at some point. A more fun version of this exact same instability is what you would see in a snap bracelet, a toy for turning a little plastic sheet into something that you can wrap around your arm. And I had a student who was trying to understand what happens if you put cuts in sheets and you pull on them. And a lot of people had been putting cuts like this, really close together, and pulling on them, and you get this nice sort of springy sheet that pops out of it. It's really soft and really springy. And he asked, well, I don't understand why no one has been making these cuts further apart. Can I go and see what happens if I play with these cut sizes? And sure enough, we made our cuts further apart and started pulling on them, and a different structure emerged, and instability occurred. And at every point in between here, this is a little instability. And each one of these arches that you can see here now can live in one of two states. It could live up, or it could live pushed down. And so now we can take structures and we can encode information in them. We can store memory in them. We can write things like BU by just switching the states of these structures. But it gets more interesting because by accident one day, while we were trying to make this and also be a little bit more lazy, we took a sheet that initially was curved and decided maybe let's not bother flattening it out because that takes too much time. And it turns out, starting with this curved sheet, and when you pull on this structure, what you create at that interface there is a snap bracelet. And so every time you pull on this structure, it snaps and it curls. And now what you have is something that's really good at picking up a whole bunch of different objects. We have a little soft robotic gripper. It's, by the standards of the field, a pretty dumb gripper. It has no idea what it's going to pick up. It just knows where to go and what to pinch. And the benefit of this type of structure is that it deforms as it tries to pick up complicated objects instead of squeezing the object itself. And so the end result of this is not only can it pick up heavy things that are 200 to 300 times the weight of the gripper itself, it can also pick up delicate things like food products, like this peanut M&M. And perhaps more interestingly, like this raspberry. And it can grasp these structures in a delicate manner without deforming or damaging them at all. And we can take these things and we can scale them up to pick up large objects, or scale them down to pick up tiny objects, or pick up tiny individual bits of sand or rice. We can stitch them together to pick up slender objects like pencils, or stitch them together to pick up arrays of objects like beads and particles. And so I hope what I've conveyed to you today is a way to take something that I think is core to our engineering curriculum and the way we teach students how to think about failure and also how to think about failure as an opportunity to create new things. And I'll leave you with this quote from Theodore von Karman, which says that scientists study the world as it is, whereas engineers create the world that has never been. And I'll just add, engineers create the world that has never been by breaking some things along the way. Thank you.